Well, good evening, and everyone, and welcome. My name is Monica Granderson. I serve as the president of the League of Women Voters, Marietta-Cobb County. Thank you for joining us tonight for this important community conversation. Finn versus the Cobb County Board of Elections Town Hall, the school board redistricting case, and the 2026 elections. The League of Women Voters is an organization dedicated to empowering voters and defending democracy. We encourage informed and active participation in government, increase understanding of public policy issues, and work to ensure that every voter has the information they need to make their voice heard. Tonight's discussion reflects the mission, this case, and its implications for school board elections directly impacts representation, accountability, and the strength of your local democracy. Our goal is to help you better understand what has happened, why it matters, and how you can effectively participate in the upcoming 2026 elections. I also want to clearly state a core principle of the League. We are nonpartisans. As reflected in tonight's event and our partnership, the League of Women Voters does not support or oppose political parties or candidates. Instead, we are committed to providing unbiased information, fostering civil dialogue, and creating a space where our community can engage thoughtfully and respectfully on the issues that affect us all. We are grateful to our partners and to each and every one of you for being here, whether in person or joining virtually. Your presence reflects a shared commitment to civic engagement and to strengthening our community. Thank you again for being a part of this important conversation, and let's get started.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Mike Tefelsky. I'm the interim chief legal officer at the Southern Poverty Law Center. We are humbled and excited to be partnering with everyone here. Before we get going on our panel, though, I wanted to take a moment to reflect and celebrate on the life of our friend, Dr. Jillian Ford, who we lost last year. And Dr. Ford was not only a plaintiff in the Finn case, but she was a visionary trailblazer, an activist, an organizer, the co-founder of Stronger Together, which was a community organization working for anti-racism in our Cobb County School District. She was a mentor to me. She was a friend to me. She was one of the first people I met when I came to Cobb County and moved here and began observing all of the racism and discrimination that I was seeing at school board meetings and that was impacting our students. And a mutual friend connected us, and we quickly became friends together in advocacy around students and families in Cobb County. Dr. Ford, or Jillian as I was lucky enough to call her, was someone who stood with students and families in Cobb County every time they needed them. She was the one who was speaking truth to the school board when students were facing racism in schools. She was the one who was advocating for students with disabilities when they were being denied accommodations. She was standing with educators who were facing termination for reading books in their classrooms. She was always there when the community needed her, and it is a deep loss to this community that she can't be here because this case simply would not have been possible without her. And I would like to bring up Tim Mensa from our partner SCSJ, who has graciously created a collage of photos to share. Do you want to speak, Tim?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Mensa. I am the videographer at Southern Coalition for Social Justice. I unfortunately never got to meet Dr. Ford. I only got to know of her work and her impact through partnership with SPLC and other organizations. And yeah, it was really impactful to kind of see how much she impacted the legacy of what voting rights and what creating an equitable space for schools in Cobb County and beyond could look like. And, that's something that, scales upward. It's so much more than just, doing work in these kind of local spaces. It really is indicative of the trend that we want to see, schools operate, and the trend that we want to see, students be able to come into a space and learn and feel like they're seen and heard. So this was kind of my, take on the life that she lived, and just trying to consolidate that into some kind of meaningful way. And I just kind of created a slideshow and composed some music behind it. So you'll see that momentarily. But yeah, thank you.
Can we run the slideshow? Thanks. Thank you, Tim, for creating that lovely slide deck. We so many memories that I didn't get to have because I only knew Dr. Ford for about 5 years, but it was really lovely to see these photos that Tim compiled. I want to take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Ford's family who's here, John and Hillary Ford, Dr. Ford's parents, her sister, Allison, her partner, Lena, and her mentee, Mani. Thank you all for being here. I don't know if folks caught the stargazer at the end there, and that was Tim's take from seeing Jillian's love for astronomy. And so I'm excited to announce that to honor the stargazer and ensure that Jillian's light continues, we'll be starting a scholarship fund in her honor. The SPLC has agreed to commit the startup fund of $25,000 to that scholarship fund that will support Cobb County students for years to come and ensure that we honor Jillian for all that she did for this community. So. Thank you all. She was a light to all of us, and her legacy will live through the students and families and community members across Cobb County and across this country. So thank you.
In the honor of Jillian, did and her parents would like to say anything on her behalf?
Learn from it and get to know her posthumously, and so that gives us great energy. Thanks for coming to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. She really loved the school district and was very Oh, thank you, sorry. Jillian really loved the school district and was very involved with students and with quite a few teachers, and was really committed to expanding educational opportunities for everybody in an equitable way, which I think is all of our goals. And unfortunately, we're some distance from that, reaching that goal, but it's still a goal towards which we reach. Excuse me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate you coming and traveling to our town hall today. As we move into our descriptive panel, I'll be introducing our panel, and I'll ask our panelists after their name is called to please come to the front. Our first panelist is Chris Shenton. Chris is a senior counsel for voting rights at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Chris has been practicing voting rights as SCSJ since 2021, and he works on SCSJ's full range of voting rights advocacy, litigation in both federal and state courts throughout the South, as well as participating in administrative hearings, policy advocacy, and supporting community work with a wide range of partners. Chris Shenton, thank you. Next is Poi Winichakul, is a senior legislative policy counsel at the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, in the SPLC Action Fund, where she oversees strategic initiatives to implement innovative policy solutions across the Deep South. In addition to her work at SPLC, she teaches voting rights law at Georgia State University School of Law and is an American Bar Association Administrative Law Fellow, where she is developing a research agenda and writing on topics at the intersection of administrative law and election law. Poi was previously a senior staff attorney in the SPLC Democracy and Voting Rights Practice Group, where she led the Center's voting rights cases in Georgia. Before joining SPLC, she served as a law clerk for judges in a U.S. District Court and in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. She has also worked on voting and civil rights issues for over a decade at various organizations, including the Brennan Center for Justice, Federal Election Commission, People for the American Way Foundation, and the Legal Defense and Education Fund. Poi is a graduate of New York University of Law, where she was a Ruth Tilden Kern Public Interest Law Scholar and editor-in-chief of the New York Law Review. She has received a BA from Oberlin College. Poi Winichakul. I've been practicing that for a while. Did better, right? Next, we have Seth Levi, is the Southern Poverty Law Center's Chief Strategy Officer. He helps to craft the future direction of the Southern Poverty Law Center by pushing for its long-term impact goals with new programmatic initiatives. A major focus for Seth is to be growing and developing the SPLC Action Fund, the SPLC 501c4 affiliate organization. Seth has also helped lead the creation of the SPLC Vote Your Voice program, which has committed significant resources to grassroots organizations dedicated to voter registration, mobilization, and civic engagement. He continues to manage the program. Seth has piloted numerous projects at SPLC during his tenure. Seth Levi, thank you. And we have one more, which is we're honored to have Charisse Davis, who is the former Cobb County School Board member. Charisse Davis, she said. Okay, there she. I was like, she doesn't want to go. Okay. Charisse Davis is a dedicated educator and librarian with 23 years of experience spanning public schools in the public library system. In 2018, she was elected to the Cobb County School Board, representing proudly East Cobb, Smyrna, and Vinings community for a 4-year term. A proud mother of 2 sons, one in high school and one in college. If she doesn't look a day over 25, Charisse remained deeply committed to helping people understand the power of their voice and their vote. Charisse Davis. And Poy, you'll be leaving this panel? Oh, okay.
Is this on? Can folks hear me? Yes? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with y'all and with my fellow panelists, many of whom have been working on this since before this litigation got kicked off. So, as a refresher, my name is Chris Shenton. I work at an organization called Southern Coalition for Social Justice that's based out of Durham, North Carolina. I work on redistricting cases throughout the South. And I'm going to start today's conversation off with a little bit of a 101 in 10 minutes about what gerrymandering is, what redistricting is, and what happened here. After that, I'm going to pass it to Poi to talk a little bit about the litigation and how that all played out. And Poi has an even harder task than I do. I'm going to be trying to summarize 60 years of case law for you. Poi has to try and summarize all the twists and turns of this litigation. I'll let you be the judge which one was more difficult. So very quickly, I want to start a little bit with a little bit of interaction. And I have 2 questions on the screen that I would love to hear someone in the audience try and answer. There is no wrong answer here. Judges get this wrong, so don't feel like you can't answer it. But my first question is, does anyone have a definition of redistricting that they would give to someone who asked them what it was? It's okay if the answer is no. I'm putting you all on the spot. Yeah, go for it.
Redrawing voting districts with the goal roughly of rebalancing the population within each district, give or take a certain percentage.
That is exactly correct. That makes sense. Well done. That is exactly what redistricting is. Redistricting is taking the population of a jurisdiction, in the case we're talking about here, the Cobb County School District, and rebalancing that population across individual district lines so that each district from which one, in this case, school board member, is elected to serve on the Cobb County School Board, has roughly equal population and complies with other legal requirements. That's exactly it. All it's doing is making sure that everybody in the county, everybody in the school district has roughly equal power and ability to elect a school board member to represent them, their families, and their interests on the school board. So we've knocked it out of the park, 10 out of 10 answer on what is redistricting. Who wants to give a definition of gerrymandering a shot? Anybody? Oh, I see a volunteer over here. That is another answer that is 100% right. Well done. I should have known a League of Women Voters event would have an informed audience. That is exactly right. Gerrymandering is taking the process of redistricting a jurisdiction, and instead of in a neutral, unbiased, fair way, making sure that every part of the jurisdiction has an equal opportunity to elect candidates to represent them, trying to tilt that game, tilt that process to favor one group, sometimes a political party, sometimes a racial or ethnic group, or to disfavor a particular political party, a particular political group, a particular racial or ethnic group. So from here, this is where these questions start to land on the litigation that we're here to discuss today. This case brought what is called a racial gerrymandering claim against the school board maps that were enacted following the 2020 census. And racial gerrymandering is a very complicated doctrine that changes every time a court speaks on it. Every case updates it, every case changes the test. So I won't strive to give you a version of the law that is changing every 3 months. But what I will tell you is that racial gerrymandering is one of the few restrictions on gerrymandering in federal or state law here in Georgia. And what racial gerrymandering prevents or prohibits is the act of gerrymandering, of taking the redistricting process and skewing it in order to sort voters according to their race or ethnicity. And it prevents doing that in either direction. It prevents sorting voters along racial lines in order to dilute their influence, to crack them. And it prevents sorting voters along racial or ethnic lines to pack them, to limit their influence to 1 or 2 districts. And what this litigation turned on was our plaintiff's allegation that the school board maps were drawn in order to pack voters of color in Cobb County into a small number of districts in order to prevent them from influencing the overall composition of the board. So I'm going to go real quickly through the previous maps, the maps that we challenged, and the maps that are in place now before I hand it over to Poi. I'm going to throw some numbers at you, but what I really want to emphasize before I start going through different demographics, different shifts, there are a lot of different ways to quantify redistricting. There are a lot of different ways to talk about redistricting. But ultimately what redistricting is it's a story about how and on what terms power is going to be exercised in a community. Who is going to be given the opportunity to influence what happens? Who is going to be given the opportunity to redirect, to change course about any number of issues that are salient in a particular community? And so what I'm going to try and focus on is I'm going to give you some of those numbers, but I'm also going to try and point out the story that's being told through these maps. So if you want to go to the next slide, there's the Nadav. Awesome. So, I'm going to go back one. Thanks, Nadav. So this is the school board map that was in place prior to the 2020 census. And as you can see, there are 7 districts or posts. And from each of those 7 posts, 1 school board member for Cobb County Schools is elected. And these are the districts that were used prior to 2020. As we heard in our great definition of redistricting, we tend to redistrict every 10 years because that is when we get a new census. And so that is when we get a better understanding of where people are living and rebalance population accordingly. So here are the districts that existed pre-2020. You can see each of the southern districts have a particular shape. You have District 3 in the southwest that kind of spans across the whole full corner of the county. District 2 coming closer to where we are sitting right now, and then District 6 spanning much of the eastern part of the county. And you can see kind of across through the donut hole of the school district that is Marietta, you can see a line that those districts kind of form together that's roughly at a 45-degree angle that kind of forms a boundary or not a boundary, but an even line of division between those districts and the rest of the school board posts in the north. And if you want to go to the next slide, Nadav. And I truly do mean it when I say I could talk to you about this for hours. I'm trying not to talk about it for hours. We submitted a 80-page report in the course of this litigation that basically focused on these 4 slides I'm showing you. So I'm not giving you the 80 pages, I promise. No homework. And what you can see in each of those districts, which were those 3 districts that we identify are districts 2, 6, and 7. And in districts 2, 6, and 7, you have a significant number of white voters and also a significant number of minority voters in each of those places. Those are the districts, or 2, 3, and 7, or 2, 3, and 6, I'm sorry. I've got my numbers backwards. You could see District 3 was the majority black, had 58% black voters, but District 2 had 35%, and District 6 and 7 had 24 and 28%. So there's a lot of voters of color in Cobb County, as we all know, but those voters are not overly packed into any one place. If we want to go to the next slide, Nadav. This is the map as it was introduced and passed after the 2020 census by the school board. And what we see now is districts 2, 3, and 6, the ones that we were talking about that spanned that full, almost the entire southern portion of the county, have now been compressed into the southeastern corner of the county. And what anyone who lives here and anyone who knows anything about Cobb County can tell you is that that area of the county is not only some of the fastest growing communities in the county, not only some of the most diverse portions of the county, but it's also the area of the county that is closest to the core of Metro Atlanta. And so what you see happening with these lines is now, instead of these districts stretching across the southeastern portion of the county, you have drawn these lines to try and pack, to contain the racial diversity of Cobb County and the growth of racial diversity in Cobb County into 3 districts. And what effect does that create across the map? What it does is it allows the remaining districts to rotate north and to take in areas that are less diverse, that are seeing less population growth, that are seeing less migration from the core of Metro Atlanta, and allows those districts to take on that less diverse population. And who can tell me, on a 7-member school board, how many votes do you need to have a majority? 4. And how many districts were drawn to contain the less diverse part of Cobb County? 4. And how many districts were drawn to contain the rapidly growing, rapidly diversifying part of Cobb County? 3. What we claimed in our lawsuit and what we showed in our lawsuit is that that was not an accident. And if you want to go to the next slide, Nadav. So you can see again, focusing on those same districts, we have now seen District 3 go from a little over 50% black to 58% black. We've seen District 6 rise to a almost majority minority district between 35% black and 14.92% Latino. We've seen District 2 dramatically increase. And if you want to go to the next slide, we can see this a little bit easier. This table shows the difference in how each of these populations changed. The ones highlighted in blue got less diverse. The ones highlighted in red got more voters of color. And so what you can see is districts 4, 5, and 7, those northern districts, all of those lost thousands of voters of color and added thousands of white voters. Districts 2 and 6 added thousands of voters of color and subtracted thousands of white voters. And what that did, in effect, was sort voters by race from these districts where they were more evenly distributed because they were not being divided on the basis of race, and made it so that there were districts that would be clearly controlled by voters of color and districts that would be clearly controlled by white voters. And like we just talked about, there are 4 districts that will be controlled by one group, and there are 3 districts that will be controlled by another. And that was done, as we alleged and showed, very intentionally. And so I want to talk very briefly, before passing it to Poi, about, if you want to go to the next slide, Nadav, about how they justified this. Very seldom does someone get to the, although not as seldom as it should be lately, does someone stand on a dais in a public hearing and say, the reason I am doing this is because I want to discriminate. The reason I am doing this is because I want to favor certain racial groups and disfavor other ones. And in this case, at least initially, the Cobb County School Board did not say that that was what they were doing. Instead, what they leaned on was a classic tactic in racial gerrymandering cases, which was to say, oh, we're not racial gerrymandering. The Voting Rights Act requires us to do this. The Voting Rights Act requires us to make sure that these districts have enough minority voters in them for minority voters to control those districts. And so we're not limiting the opportunities for voters of color. We're expanding them, we're protecting them, we're making sure that voters of color are heard, but only so much. And Poi will talk a little bit about this, with, again, not trying to bore you with 60 years of legal doctrine. That flies directly in the face of a Supreme Court case from 2017 called Cooper v. Harris that says when you invoke the Voting Rights Act to draw districts, to use race to move voters into certain districts, you need to make sure, you need to do the math to make sure that voters of color actually require those moves in order to protect their electoral opportunities. Because the Voting Rights Act is a really important law. And when the Voting Rights Act requires you to do that, then we want to make sure you do that. But when the Voting Rights Act does not require you to do that, we want to make sure that we're not accidentally discriminating or pretending we're not discriminating while secretly seeking to do so in order to justify that in terms that are easier for it to go down. No one wants to be against the Voting Rights Act. At least they didn't used to be. But people also don't really want to comply with it either. They can't say you don't have those rights, but they certainly don't want to give them to you. And what this case from 2017 says is, nope, we're not doing that. If you're going to say you have to do it for this reason, prove it. And what this case turned on in many respects from a legal perspective is whether or not the school board had proven that. And what we came to find out was they had not even gotten close. I think that's a good place to leave it. This is the current plan that was put into place. You'll notice it's different than the last two we were looking at. This is taken directly from the school board's website now. And this is the plan that was put in place after, at the end of our litigation. The district court for the Northern District of Georgia struck down the plan that the school board passed as a racial gerrymander and required the legislature to pass a new map and put this into place. So this is the map that we're currently voting on here in Cobb County, and it's in place because the district court struck down the previous one. So Poi, do you want to take it from there?
Thank you, Chris. That was an excellent explanation. I'm so happy you went first and I didn't have to do it. Again, my name is Poi Winichakul. I'm an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I was so happy to be part of this extraordinary team of people who brought the litigation, Finn versus Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration, that we filed in 2022. I'm truly honored not only to be here with various litigators and advocates, but also plaintiffs, the League of Women Voters of Marietta-Cobb County, who's graciously hosting this event, as well as Ms. Karen Finn. We're also plaintiffs in this litigation, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly save it for the Q&A for Ms. Finn to talk more about what it's like to be a plaintiff. I'll explain a little bit more about the case, where we are now, what it means for the elections this year, and then I just want to close out a little bit of trying to give some color for this litigation itself and what it means to have been part of a litigation like this. I really hope many of you are not part of litigation. Because it's a lot. So like I mentioned, in 2022, we filed this case after the 2020 census. Chris just shared how the school board came up with a new map and tried to redraw the lines to pack Black and Brown voters, specifically Black and Latinx communities, into 3 districts, compact districts in the southeastern part of the county. But just as a precursor, we didn't come to this litigation saying, okay, let's just look at Cobb County today and see what they're doing. We, mostly through Mike and Jillian, had been doing advocacy on the education front for a long time and had been hearing about the number of issues that everyone here has heard about occurring in the Cobb County schools. And essentially, I'm a voting rights lawyer, and I was just looking at this and saying, Mike, what is going on? what is going on? There's one thing after another, and there's so much tension. And quite frankly, this was before the kind of national trend in the anti-DEI, critical race theory, all of that. This was before all of that. And so to me, to a voting rights lawyer like me, who's not steeped in education issues or really any other issues, what that tells me is something's going on here with people who are not able to have their voices heard and represented, and their representatives are not accountable to them. And I say this as an allegory to maybe perhaps other systemic problems going on in our country writ large right now that we might all want to examine and think hard about whether or not our electoral system is working for us and how do we make that better. But that's how we came to this case. And so when we crunched the numbers, mostly Chris, because I can't use Excel, but once we crunched the numbers and put it up against the legal claims, lo and behold, there was a representation problem. Really not shocking if you know the events that have gone on in Cobb County, which I don't need to regale you with those stories because you all know them. You lived them. You are part of them. These are your representatives. And so we filed this case and we won what is called a preliminary injunction, which is an emergency action that we put before the court, asking the court, saying, hey, you need to deal with this right now. We can't wait. And the court said, you're right. You have a high likelihood of success. It's a super high bar to meet. High likelihood of success that you are right that this map is racially gerrymandered. And picking up where Chris left off, that is what forced the state legislature, who technically approves the local maps in Georgia, forced them to draw a new map in 2024, and that's the map that you have today. I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of the case, even though I know many of the attorneys here would very much like me to do so. And I will tell you privately what I can some other time. But I can tell you this is one of the toughest cases I've ever had to be a part of. And I think almost every attorney on this case team can say the same. And that is and that's when we knew we were really right. We were onto something. We had brought the right case for the right reasons in the right way. We dotted our I's, crossed our T's, and the school district fought tooth and nail to hang on to their old map, but they couldn't. Which is why today, the map that was put in place in 2024 is the map that you have for your Cobb County school districts. And that's what you have to elect your Cobb County School Board representatives this year. Chris talked a lot about the changing demographics in Cobb County, and you can see with all the turmoil in the school district and how much they worked very, very hard to protect the old map, why this new map matters, why it really matters for every single Cobb County voter to go out there and vote this year, vote in 2 years, because you have your elections every 2 years and they alternate even in odds, and Ms. Davis can talk more about that. But this is truly, we've done what we can with the litigation, and now we're coming to you. In voting rights litigation, we don't pick winners and losers for elections. We ensure that elections are open and there are opportunities for every single voter to be able to cast their vote and have their voices heard and have their votes counted. That's all we're trying to do. So now that we've done the best that we can, it's up to Cobb County voters to express their opinions about their school board representatives, what they care about, and to really make sure that their voices have a direct effect on how the school district is run. So I'll leave it at that and leave much more for Q&A. The Q&A is going to be spicy. You can ask whatever you want. Litigation's over. I guess some things are forever privileged. But I will also say now I'm going to pass it to my colleague Seth, who can share more about some of the things that came about through the litigation that led us down different accountability paths. So I talked about the education work that we had done beforehand that led us to the voting rights case that we filed. But as a result of the voting rights case, we found a lot more information, and that we realized we had to fight in different ways and seek justice in other ways too.
Thanks, Poi. Always intimidating to follow you. Well, you do the real work, you know. I just cause trouble for everybody. So through work I did at another organization, I was taking a look at campaign contributions in the 2024 school board election. And yeah, it was 2024. I'm getting my years all mixed up. We're in 26. So it's 2024. And I noticed that three of the candidates in the May primary received 3 checks for $3,300. And that's kind of interesting because the campaign finance limit in a local election is $3,300. So each one of these 3 contributors maxed out. One of the contributors was the law firm that was representing the school board in the lawsuit. Now, there's nothing necessarily unusual about that. You know, people give money to folks who are their clients. But we see these 2 other organizations that gave $3,300 contributions on the same day. So we started poking into who are these organizations, and we saw that an attorney at the law firm was involved in creating these 2 corporations. And further, this attorney was involved in the actual gerrymandering of the districts. You know, I start looking up like depositions and old newspaper articles. I'm like, that guy's name, that's really familiar. And here he is now working at the law firm, serving as the registered agent of these 2 corporations that were just created overnight, and 2 days later gave out $9,900 to 3 candidates. So in my capacity at this other organization, I went ahead and filed an ethics complaint alleging that these 3 corporations were really just one and the same, and that the law firm had exceeded campaign finance limits by $6,600 to the 3 candidates. And for 2 of the candidates, they repeated this financing scheme back in October. So 2 of the candidates received nearly $20,000 as a result of the scheme that I alleged in my capacity at another organization. And that's a lot of money. You know, in one of the races, one of the candidates, he only raised about like $54,000, so 45% of his campaign contributions came from this one source. So anyway, filed an ethics complaint with the Georgia State Ethics Commission saying like, hey, this is really like one and the same donor. They went over campaign finance limits. And there's some other allegations we peppered in there. And ultimately, the Ethics Commission actually agreed with us, which was pleasantly surprising. And the 3 candidates were forced to return like a total of tens of thousands of dollars. It was actually forfeited to the state. It didn't go back to the law firm. And that the 2 shell corporations were fined $5,000 civil penalties each. Now, I guess offline we can get into why didn't the law firm receive the civil penalty? Why was it the shell corporations? But that was the ruling of the Ethics Commission. And through just like further investigation, we just started seeing that all of these people that were mentioned in the lawsuit who are involved in the gerrymandering are now connected to the law firm, connected to its political operation. So, you know, I guess a couple things going on here. You know, we're doing a lot of talk about like fairness and equity and just sort of an expectation when people run for office, there are some basic rules that everyone is going to abide by. So it's a level playing field. And that clearly, you know, wasn't the case. 2, there was obviously some level of intent to try to hide from the public how the candidates were being funded. Why else would you set up 2 shell companies to move money through to make those donations? At least that's my opinion. You'd have to ask the people who are behind it why they actually did it. And then the third element is also just this kind of like weird connection between the law firm that's representing the district, that's also helping to fund some of, the school board members. And, I think there are some like open questions about how the district is paying the law firm and then the money is actually coming back to certain members through contributions. Now, to be clear, like none of this is illegal. That's what the law is, but I still think it's, an open question about, how taxpayers, how families sort of feel about how these campaigns are being funded, about the lack of transparency, and how, the law firm that's just supposed to be providing legal representation is also involved on the political side. So that's kind of what we uncovered, and I hope going forward people are going to pay closer attention to those campaign finance reports to see who's funding everything. And I can go on forever. I have like my whole conspiracy chart showing how everyone is connected, but yeah. Well, we the other organization I work for, all of our information was we put it out there in a on a Google Drive for anyone who wants to see all the supporting evidence. And again, the Ethics Commission did rule that that money, the campaign finance limits were exceeded. The school board members had to forfeit a good deal of that money. So that's the other kind of part of the story. Anything else I should say? Got it? Okay.
Hello, Monica. If I have a youthful glow, it's because I'm not on this board anymore. So I've been laying pretty low since my time on the school board. And when Mike asked me to participate, I wasn't exactly sure, but he told me about this tribute to Dr. Ford, and I know Dr. Ford would be like, get yourself together and go and speak. So I'm here for Dr. Ford. After the 2024 election, the University of Florida Election Lab showed that almost 86 million voters did not show up. They stayed home. And so if this voting bloc, which they are a voting bloc, that did not vote voting bloc, they were a larger number than any number that voted for one of the two main presidential candidates. So a very powerful voting bloc they are. At the time, there may have been many reasons not to vote for one of those presidential candidates, but what they also didn't do was vote in possibly a school board race, insurance commissioner, name any of the other elections that would have been on the ballot at the time as well. When you hear about the did not vote group, what we're learning, very, very unfortunately, is that some of these did not vote voters are actually some of the people that we're electing. And so they're not voting. Some of the people trying to be elected in our upcoming elections are actively choosing not to vote. So now that we've gotten that depressing information out of the way, I wanted to just generally talk about the importance of voting, and I know it's very much preaching to the choir, so the message is truly about, it's not just us, we have got to get our neighbors, our family, our friends to understand the importance of voting and to get out there and to help them actually access voting at a time when it's becoming more and more difficult to do so. So there's a saying, I've said this and I encourage other people to as well, that you may not do politics, but politics does you. Love that one. And Ibram X. Kendi, the professor and author, goes further to say that if you say I don't do politics, it's to say I don't do power. And when you say I don't do power, you are telling individuals to do what you want, do what you will, I do not care. And I do not believe there is a person alive in this country who does not care, who does not want what's best for themselves, their family, their children, other people's children. And so for us to vote is to say, I am acting on that care. I am doing my part to make sure that my community can thrive. Another saying that we hear a lot from people who do not vote is that, politics. I don't like it. You know, there's this ickiness feeling with politics. But one thing that I had to come to learn is that everything is political. You know, of course, what we're paying at the gas pump. But if I tell you that dual language immersion program you like so much at your school, that too is political. Your school, which you probably really like your children's school, and a lot of people do, even in the talk of all the failing schools and the culture wars, most people like their kids' school. They love their kids' teacher. But your school is very much a part of a school district, and it behooves all of us to understand what's happening at that district, who's running it, who's making the decisions. And so I cannot stress enough the idea that everything is political because everything is policy related. And so if you care about anything, there is an election, local, federal, most likely local, that is connected to that thing that you care about. So I wanted to talk about my own voting record because I went back to my voter page and I counted. I voted 8 times in 2025. So if you're in the area, you know we've had special elections, yes. Runoffs, because you got to have a runoff 8 times. And I really do think that if you're doing it right, there's no downtime to voting if you're doing it right. I personally prioritize voting because I know what my goals are for the kind of community I want to live in. I think about my children. And so I will jump through every hoop that I need to in order to be able to vote and to say, this is what's important to me, and I'm going to show that by showing up to vote. We do live in a state, we do live in a country where there are many, many hoops. And when I talk about the importance of voting, I don't want to chastise anyone. I don't want to not acknowledge that there are these hoops that exist. But I think we all have to start with the idea that this is very important, it's a non-negotiable, and then we attack it from there. And so if they change early voting, this is no longer a voting location because there's a brewery now. So I'm gonna figure out where else I'm gonna be voting. But these things are happening, they're happening to us, and it's coming fast. But we have to be aware of what's going on, and we have to understand what we need to do so that that power of voting does not get taken away from us. The other part that is really important to me is that once I vote for someone, like that's not the end of it. Like my job is still to hold them accountable. When I send someone to an office and I feel like they're not doing the job, then I will not vote for them again. And collectively, people that are not acting in our best interests can be voted out. And so it is important that we're also informed voters, that we know who we're voting for, but that we're also keeping up with what's going on and what they're doing. Yet another argument that people make, my vote doesn't count, my vote doesn't matter, I'm just one person. Well, yeah, we have this electoral college, and it can be very frustrating at the presidential level to see that the people that we are supporting, even when winning the popular vote, do not become president. But of course, there's no electoral college in our local elections. The recent Marietta mayoral race was won by 87 votes. 87. If I asked any of you to list out 87 people right now, you could do it. The year that I won my race in the governor's race, that was won by 55,000 votes out of 3.9 million cast, I think the number was. And a friend of mine shared online recently that in a recent House election, 1,700 people showed up out of the 45,000 registered voters. So the elections are happening, people are voting, you're just not participating in that. So you're letting these 1,700 people make the decision for you and choosing not to be one of those voices. So I do want to just end with this is a very helpless time. You can feel very helpless with everything going on. And voting for me is one way to not feel that way. There's a book on tyranny by Timothy Snyder, and he's talking about what we're living in. But, from history, the lessons are all there. And so the lesson number 3 is to support the multi-party system that we have, to support democratic elections. And he goes on to say to vote in local and state elections while you can. And I cannot stress that enough, while we can. The school board, you've heard so much tonight about the school board. If you are a parent, a student, employee of the system, those are the obvious reasons to care about what's going on with the school district. But all of us need to be concerned with our kids being educated and being treated fairly. And so many people have been fighting for that for so many years. But one thing that came out of my time on the board, during a time of COVID, you had one of the largest movements for racial justice after the murder of George Floyd, where so many people perking up to say, now what? Who's making these decisions? And so you had new community groups, new student groups, many of whom are still working today to hold the school board accountable. When I was there, it was very much that we had two boards. We had a majority who maybe kind of knew what was going on, but still kind of made decisions. And then those of us that were on the outside looking in who definitely didn't know anything, weren't supposed to know anything, but we're very much the ones trying to advocate for the community. And so all we could do was encourage the community to get involved and to speak up and to form those groups. And we shared as much as we could about what even our board was supposed to be doing. And so the school board has three very huge jobs. You're supposed to evaluate, hire a superintendent, you're supposed to set policy, and you're supposed to manage a budget, which is now almost $2 billion in Cobb County schools. And so if you own a business, please be interested in what our kids are learning and whether or not they're going to be able to work at your business one day. If you're interested, I would tell people who are interested in safe neighborhoods. You better hope that the kids that are coming through our schools have something productive to do when they leave our schools and they're ready to begin their lives. So whatever your position is, you have to have an interest in what's happening in our schools. Again, people love their schools. We have to know what's going on in the school district because it certainly can affect even these schools that we love so much. And so we just have to pay attention. And I just encourage you to talk to your neighbors. I have a college student right now. We don't make it easy for college students to graduate to vote, excuse me. And so I'm helping him navigate that. I have my neighbors, my neighbors. I've got my three neighbors that I know to text every single time there's an election. I let them know the early voting locations. I think at least for one of the families, I think it's the difference between them voting and not. And so that's what we do, and they just know they're going to get those texts from me. So I thank you all so much for being here, for learning about all of what's going on in Cobb County. I do want to suggest too, as we're becoming these informed voters, to check my voter page. It is an amazing thing to get that sample ballot on my voter page. Make a nice night of it. Look up these candidates, social media, websites, and actually be informed voters, because that's the next level. It's, not just show up, but become informed voters. So thank you all very much for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our panel, to Chris, to Poi, to Seth and Charisse for being part of our panel today. Now we're going to be switching over to our Q&A panel. And as I call your name, we just ask you to please come up. Our first person on our Q&A panel will be Akiva Friedlin. He's a senior staff attorney at the ACLU of Georgia. He works on litigation to reverse injustices in the criminal legal system, secure the right to vote, and protect other civil rights. Previously in Georgia, he was an attorney at the Georgia Resource Center, where he represented death sentence people seeking to challenge their unjust convictions and sentences. Before that, he was a lawyer at the Southern Center for Human Rights, where he worked to prevent the incarceration of people who cannot afford to pay money, bail, or exploitative fines and fees. He's a graduate of Hampshire College and Stafford Law School. Introduces Akiva. Next, we have the honor to introduce Karen Finn. She is a mother of a son who has who is a special needs student in Cobb County, Georgia. Her son faced significant challenges at Wheeler High School, which ultimately resulted in an unjust expulsion. They sought the assistance of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and thanks to their involvement, their son has returned to Wheeler High School before they had to relocate. Next, we have Paul Shokett, who is an associate at McDermott, Will, and Schultz, where he focuses on complex commercial litigation. He has also maintained a robust pro bono practice. Prior to joining the firm, Paul served as a judicial law clerk for the Honorable Philip M. Halpern of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. Thank you, Paul. And then lastly, we have Seth coming back. I've already introduced you, but you're already amazing. So he'll be coming to talk about ethics. So there will be mics that will be passed around. So if you do have any questions, or there are any questions coming from the Zoom chat, you're more than welcome. Mike and Kim will be holding the microphones and passing those around to our guests in the audience to ask questions. And based on the specialty of our panelists, they will be able to go ahead and answer those questions. But let's just kind of give maybe a quick overview while we get those mics going. Ms. Karen Finn, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Karen Friend. I'm from Atlanta. My son has a disability. He wants me to let you guys know that he is into the judges and the attorneys, and he wants to be a TV judge. And he gave me this papers, but we don't have time to read it. So, all right. So, a little bit about me is that I'm his mom, and we've been together through thick and thin since he came here on this planet. I do, I have to work and all that stuff, but he's my main job. I call him my 24/7 job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to? Okay.
Akiva and Paul, let's give a brief overview while we're getting started. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So, as the introduction said, I work for a private firm, McDermott, Will, and Schulte. I got involved in this case. I love this case. This was my first. Boys laughing because it was tough, but this was my first case coming out of law school. I always wanted to be involved. I always wanted to be involved in voting rights cases. It's what I talked to our pro bono coordinator about. And as Poi said, it was tough at times because the other side, they threw everything against the wall, but I got great experience, and I think going forward, I learned a lot.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Akiva Friedlin. As introduced, I'm at the ACLU of Georgia. Been there since July of 2024, where we jumped into a lot of litigation around voting rights right before the November election, which was a lot of training real fast, often with the help of Poi. I got involved in this case because of that timeline toward the end of it, but it was still a great, learned a lot doing that. I started doing voting rights at the ACLU of Georgia. Before that, it was mostly criminal legal reform kind of stuff. And I told myself during the month off before I started ACLU, you know what, I'm gonna learn about how this redistricting stuff works. I'm gonna learn the maps. I'm gonna Monte Carlo chain, Markov chain project. No, I didn't learn any of that. So I have a lot to learn from the people here. I really appreciate it. And I'm here to answer just general questions about things that are happening around voting in Georgia, which is a lot of cuckoo stuff.
And just Seth, if you can just reintroduce yourself for those that came in later.
Sure. Hey, I'm Seth Levi. I'm with Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer.
Excellent. So we're going to go to our audience to see if you have any questions. I see one person. Please introduce yourself as well as ask your question.
Hi, good evening. I have a question about what we've heard to this point. So if it's not something I can ask, then we won't do it. My name is Jennifer Susko. I am a school counselor. I'm a former Cobb County School District school counselor. I resigned in protest because of their critical race theory ban and their ban against the 1619 project. I work at Georgia Cyber Academy right now, though, as a ninth grade counselor. I am currently also a candidate for Cobb County School Board, post 6. And also, this is the question part, I was subpoenaed in this case and asked for all of my communication between everyone and God since 2016. And so I would like to know if anyone can answer sort of the question about why did the district enter this lawsuit and ask to be sued instead of it just being against the Board of Elections, how it was initially?
So the way voting rights litigation works is you sue the entity that's enforcing the map. So in this case, it was the Board of Elections. However, a lot of times in these cases, the board doesn't want to actually litigate the case, or it will only put certain arguments forward. Because of that, at least this is what the Board of Elections stated in their motion to get into the case. They wanted to put forth a defense. And we were fine with that. You know, we were focused on getting a new map, and that's actually quite common in voting rights cases. What's uncommon is what you just referred to, and that's in line with what I had just said. The Board of Elections, their litigation strategy was just throw everything against the wall, see if you could, they could push us off course. Luckily, they didn't.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Imani Luban. I am a senior at Spelman College, and I'm just so inspired by the work here. And I specifically have a question for you, Ms. Finn, particularly with your story with your son. I kind of want you to elaborate more on it, and how did you get involved, and how did attorneys get involved? Because I know sometimes, with families, it's very hard to take that next step. So can you elaborate for that for me?
Absolutely. So as Monica had stated in the intro, my son was a special needs student at Wheeler High School. He had an IEP. In my opinion, the school wasn't following the IEP, and that led to some issues. Then the county didn't address the issues appropriately, and so they decided to expel him. And so I was fighting that, and then I think that's about the time when I met Mike from SPLC, and he guided me and worked with me and taught with me, and he kept telling me I had to be nice. Yeah. And so after SPLC got involved, my son was able to return to Wheeler High School. It was still a little rocky, but after a couple years, things started to improve. But he got, we had to leave the district, and so that's when he really improved. So, yeah. So Mike was my connection to getting things turned around for my son.
What are those steps if anyone else has a case or anyone else in the community has questions? How do they get in contact with you? What are the steps that they should take? And any of the lawyers can also answer that as well.
Okay. So a lot of times, I had a lot of issues in Cobb County even before Mike. Cobb County made it really difficult for him to get a fair education. And then I left the county, and then we came back, and that's when all these problems started. However, the steps is if your student isn't receiving fair, appropriate services, a lot of us would reach out to an advocate. or an attorney, a special needs attorney to be exact. I was going through some financial issues, so I reached out to legal aid. Legal aid, they did a wonderful job, and because my case was, because there was so much discrimination in my case, legal aid turned it over to SPLC, and then Mike got involved. And Mike is, I mean, he's been with me every step of the way. So one of the steps is to reach out to an advocate or to a special needs attorney, or you can go to parent to parent, and they may be able to assist you.
Yes, that's good. And then after that, after she came and spoke with everyone, what are the next steps that from SPLC side or ACLU side that should happen after that, or any other direction that we can get from the lawyers on that?
So as to this particular case, it started several years before I joined ACLU of Georgia, so I'm not actually sure. It sounds like SPLC got involved in it first, and we joined them as opposed to other cases where it might go the other way around. The ACLU of Georgia has a part of its website that says "Share Your Story," where you can, tell us if you're experiencing some kind of civil rights issue. Unfortunately, we get far more requests for help or notices about what's going on than we can provide assistance to people. But we do read them all, and we will eventually reply. And if we have somewhere to at least direct you, we will do so. And it's very important that we learn from people what is happening. And in a small, percentage of those cases where it's something within that we're currently working on, things might proceed from there. And a lot of times we also end up representing in impact cases, working with organizations like the League of Women Voters. And if you're involved in an organization like that, a lot of times they'll already be involved in, an issue in the community. So that's another way that could arise.
Any other audience questions?
My question is specifically about the local league's involvement in this case. I'd like more information.
But we definitely have our flyer up. We always do support anyone that wants to work with us as far as defending democracy or has any questions as it relates to voting, participating, advocating, getting out the vote, who wants to work with our young voters as well. We have Madison, our Young Voices chair, that we're just starting with that. So we definitely encourage you to speak with us. We also want you to go onto our Vote 411 page, because that is where we ask the questions of any of those candidates that are going to be in any of our elections. You can go onto our website, LWV-Marietta-Cobb County CobbGA.com for more information. We have 13 leagues in the state of Georgia, so there's always one that's maybe close to you. Or you can go ahead and look on here to our barcode or a QR code, and you can connect directly with us. Oh, okay. Oh, in this case, okay. Thank you.
That's okay. Sure. I mean, look, the case. The case started in 2022. So this case has preceded Monica. I had a baby. 2 other babies happened or birth during this event, during litigation. Thank you. So we may not all remember how this happened, but a couple of things. So the league was an obvious choice they were already involved in a lot of the democracy issues that are happening around Cobb County. They're central to a lot of the voting work that happens here. And when we have a voting issue, they know about it already. They're in every crevice of this county, boots on the ground, in communities, talking to neighbors about Every single issue. I heard from Julie Bolin this morning, or in the parking lot right before this event, about how this is no longer going to be an early voting location, how that's going to be a problem. They are so well informed that when we raise the issue of racial gerrymandering and unfair representation in Cobb County, they took it very seriously. And sometimes that's all it takes. When, I connected with Miss Finn through Mike, she got it right away. She's like, I have experienced these issues in Cobb County. I don't like the unfairness about how my son was treated. I also don't like the unfairness of how I am being treated as a voter. And so it's these people who, whether or not you're an expert in voting or whatever it is, or deeply involved, there is a fundamental sense of people who are attuned to advocacy and seek justice in small ways every single day, to know and to know when it's time to step up and be involved in something. And that's exactly what the League of Women Voters of Marietta-Cobb County did. As with all the other plaintiffs in our group, Dr. Ford, who I refused to call Jillian. She said, you need to call me Jillian. I kept calling her Dr. Ford. But it was... So that's how we kind of got connected for this, if I could say, ragtag team of attorneys and ragtag team of plaintiffs who just wanted to step up and say and take a stand. I think I remember Maxie on the phone call when she called me and said, yeah, we want to join this lawsuit. She's like, we just have to take a stand. That's what we decided. And I actually remember almost every one of our clients saying that to us, and that was the refrain. So that's how that happened. And if I could, I got the mic, so I'm just going to say this. Litigation's really hard. We talked about the nuts and bolts of litigation from the perspective of a lawyer. If I could just take a few minutes just to talk about this. I talked about how many things happened over the course of this litigation. There were children born. There were people who graduated. Our clients who are high school students graduated, and now they're graduating college. So lots of life events. I went to Miss Finn's house and said, hey, I need to get a bunch of documents off your computer because the school board's asking for it. It's more than just filing paperwork, getting to say you filed paperwork, marching into court, making a bunch of arguments in front of a judge, and then attorneys yelling at each other. We spent a lot of time together. A lot of time talking about what we wanted to do, the tiniest details that Miss Finn was working this whole time. She's also got a 24/7 job of taking care of her son. She's paying rent. And so, I just wanted to just recognize the tremendous effort that went into this litigation, that we continue in all of our advocacy in so many ways, and how it brings us together and connects us in deeper ways than we can imagine, just to provide this information for you to go and vote. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to really kind of sit with that and share that with everyone here. I have to think about what I'm allowed to say. Yeah, come back to me, but I will say there were at least 2 fake identities revealed during the course of this litigation. The school district put forth 2 fake people that we had to uncover their fake identities over the course of the litigation. I am not a criminal attorney or anything. I'm a voting rights attorney, and I did not expect these twists and turns. That's probably pretty good.
Could I say something related, not to the fake identity part, but to what Poi was saying about importance of people's contributions? Lawyers and civil rights litigators or independent, one-on-one attorneys have an important role and we can provide important services, but we're not the ones who make change happen in society. We're not the one who improve our communities. We can, we can defend movements, we can help advance their strategies, but it's guidance counselors, it's parents, it's sanitation workers or doctors or maybe lawyers talking to their neighbors as neighbors, working with groups like the League or getting together and being like, nobody's addressing this issue that we have. So, we want to hear from you and we want to collaborate, but especially in a time like this, where the media covers what a lawyer says, there's an event, there was a court hearing, there was a ruling, we can go cover that. We got to talk to our elders and read our history because that's where change comes from. So thank you all for, being engaged in this.
Hi, I'm Laura Judge. I live in the East Cobb area of Cobb County, and I was a 2024 candidate for the Cobb County School Board. First, I want to say thank you to everyone that worked on this case. Poi, I know you were in the Capitol trying to prevent this from becoming a case. Thank you. Because it started before it even got to the courtroom when they were trying to pass these maps in the legislature. And so I wanted to say thank you for that. But I wanted to piggyback on something Charisse and Seth were saying on the first panel, is that many people don't know that over 65% of your property taxes go into our schools. So when Seth was saying that they made these shell companies, our taxes are paying the school board or going into our school board budget. They're paying for these lawyers, and then these lawyers were taking our tax dollars to pay for these candidates as well. So you're supporting these candidates that you may or may not want to support. And I know, Seth, you had said that you have it somewhere that everyone can access this. Can you repeat where that can be found at?
I think right now it's sitting on newsouthernmajority.com. All the information should be up there at that website.
My name is Tanya Hollis. I am a Smyrna resident. I first want to say thank you for your service and your contributions and all the work and the inroads that you are doing. You are doing meaningful and impactful work. And I know sometimes when you are in the trenches, it can feel like there is no hope, and it can feel like that maybe there will not be a win out of this. But the sacrifices you're making with your spouses and your partners and as parents, know that we truly appreciate all the work that you have been doing. My daughter and I knocked on over 500 doors for Sam Foster, who lost by 87 votes. And I remember countless mornings of us waking up, putting signs out in yards for the presidential election. But I just want to say that keep doing the work. You'd be surprised at these young minds at a very young age that are very much listening and are very much aware of what's going. I am shocked, but that last year my daughter said when she was 7 that all of the kids in the class were fighting about who's going to be the next president. And I'm like, you're 7 years old and you guys are having these political discussions in the classroom. But my comment is the board is doing so much to discourage civic input and discourage public comments from being aired. Is there any work that's being done, like, for example, folks like me that are parents that can't make it to these board meetings and I can't speak because I'm at work? And is there any intentional work that's being done to sort of turn that around?
One of the things I would do, Charisse was my board member. I had a problem, not with Charisse, but the person that they hired to oversee Cobb County schools. So I would write my board member a lot. I wrote the superintendent a lot too. Not that that made a difference, but Charisse was, when she was in office, she would do her best to try to change things around. But unfortunately, in Cobb County, it's a 4-3 decision on everything, and they had, during her tenure, they had a lot of fighting, and that was unfortunate for parents and students. But that's the only thing we have right now, I believe, is we have to vote, and like Charisse said earlier, you have to contact your board member, whoever you elected, the candidate, the elected officials in office, and you don't have to just write that one person you elected. I would write everybody, including the superintendent, and I would keep writing. So it may work, and sometimes it may not. One big issues we had was the students going back to school after COVID, and that was so politicized that, I mean, it was scary. And but I would write everybody. I wrote the whole board, the whole school, and the teachers. Yeah, and and when Poi and Mike were like, "We need all your emails," I'm like, "Oh Lord." Yeah. So yeah, because yeah, that's, and then my friends say, you know, when I write things, they're like, "You can't say that." I'm like, and so that's what I would do, just stay in touch with them. Oh, you're good.
Say that also the media, the press, Cobb Courier, continue to write, continue to make your voices heard, continue to push to get those answers.
Hi, my name is Zach Humphreys. I'm with Senator Jaha Howard's office. Sorry that he couldn't be here today, but I mean, he used to be a member of the Cobb County School Board, so this is something that means a lot to him. You know, I think we're talking a little bit on the sort of local side, but I think maybe highlighting a little bit more on the state side about, you know, what sort of legislation do we see coming out of the Capitol sort of this session and, you know, last session that are going to be impacting voters' ability to, you know, to cast their ballot. I mean, I know for me personally, I'm a manager of a polling precinct over in Dunwoody, so you know, I'm always having to, you know, make sure that everything is getting aligned so that people can properly vote. But you know, I don't know if anybody on the board would be able to sort of answer what's kind of coming out of the Capitol right now. Yeah, sorry.
So I don't work in policy directly, very intentionally, because, you know, judges are supposed to at least follow the law. They're not allowed to just kind of make it up with, you know, their closest friends and colleagues, the way they do in legislatures. But it looks like this session, there have not been any enormous, catastrophic bills. And others who know more about the legislature, please jump in or correct me. But there are some kind of looming strange things. You know, there were some bills passed in 2024 that made some mandates about how ballots are supposed to work, but they didn't actually fund the counties to fix them. So now everyone's scrambling. How can we fix that? And then there are people thinking, how can we use this opportunity to advance our strange agenda? So that kind of stuff is always happening. The legislative sessions over I think, April 2nd, I think, is Sinai. So, you know, there are zombie bills and poison pills and all kinds of weird things that could still happen. So stay tuned. But if anyone else wants to.
Well, there is this ongoing obsession with hand counting ballots, which, you know, on its face, you know, maybe that sounds like a good idea. We can't trust the machines, but all of the data shows when you hand count ballots, it's never accurate, especially from one count to another. And just kind of imagine what would happen if, on election night, we have to hand count like 4 million ballots. It's going to be a catastrophe. So I think just be on the lookout that there's just continued agitation. We have to hand count the ballots.
Oh, my name is Madison. I'm a resident of Kennesaw, and I'm the Young Voices Chair for the League of Women Voters of Marietta-Cobb. My question is, if there's one lesson that you hope Cobb residents or voters take from this case, what would you want them to know or take away from it?
I think we've touched on it repeatedly here, but stand up, fight for your rights. I think Poi mentioned that it was clear something was going on, but it ultimately took this lawsuit. It took fighting from the beginning to the end to make a difference. So if you want to make a difference, stand up, get involved in any way you can.
I'll just jump in really quickly. I think it's also just the importance of school board. Like, there would not have been all of this fighting over years and this whole other campaign finance angle if these elections weren't so critically important. And I know everyone in this room cares about school board elections. That's why we're here. But there's a lot of people who aren't in this room who kind of just brush it aside as this just minor thing. And it's not minor. And the fact that there was this massive fight over it, which is still going, is the evidence of how important it is, especially for the people who are so desperate to keep the school board gerrymandered.
Good evening. My name is LaToya Palmer Addy. I had a question that is twofold. First, I want to say, Ms. Finn, thank you for having the courage to take on Cobb County. As a fellow mom of children with disabilities, I know that we have 24/7 responsibilities on top of working. So to do this is definitely commendable, but hopefully you will not be the last, and that you will encourage others to do the same. And thank you for plugging Parent to Parent of Georgia. Definitely a great resource. And all of those services that we offer are free to families. I know that you took on Cobb County because of the issues that you had. And I couldn't remember because I can't see the names from back here, who mentioned that you receive a lot of cases that you're unable to take on. So I would like to kind of get an idea of how many cases you're seeing out of Cobb County that deal with students with disabilities.
First of all, to the question before that about what we learned is the depths that members of the school board will go to maintain power, to lie, to cheat, to steal our tax dollars, to retain power. That's what I learned from the school board. And so when I told Ms. Finn early on when we met to be nice, that was before I had learned a lot around what was going on in Cobb County. And so as far as students with disabilities, so folks know, there's probably estimated 15,000 students probably with disabilities in Cobb County. Cobb County is notorious for denying families and students of services, accommodations. There are very few education civil rights lawyers in this state who do disability rights work, and they know that. And so they take advantage of that by denying families and students of their rights, trampling those rights, and then demanding that they get lawyers to fight them, which they know families don't have access to those lawyers because they don't exist very much, but also because they generally cost a significant amount of money to pay what you would need to pay to take Cobb County to court. So students with disabilities are overrepresented, as Ms. Finn shared, of those students who are being suspended and expelled from school. I remember when we sent our first open records request to the district to get all their discipline data, they sent us an invoice for over $40,000 to get that data, because they don't want you all to know what they're doing to kids with disabilities and students of color in Cobb. It was interesting because we copied the board members when we sent that first. This was before we had filed any cases against Cobb. There was one school board member who responded to that email off the thread, and she may not remember doing this, but she said, "I'd like to see that data if you can get your hands on it." And that was Ms. Davis. And so we ultimately did get that data. And what it showed was that over 750 kids every year, and that number's rising, are being expelled from Cobb or facing expulsion from Cobb County schools. Less than 2% of those kids have access to a lawyer. They are overrepresented, Black students and students with disabilities. We had a third-party data research analysis look at data. We were working with Jillian on collecting this data and developing a report that we could put out that showed how many lost days of instruction students with disabilities are losing in Cobb because they're being suspended and expelled. And that number is tens of thousands of days every year. And so it's a colossal failure in how they're implementing their special education system within Cobb. And it requires leadership like Ms. Davis who care about these kids and want to make sure that they're being serviced with our tax dollars, right? That's the money, not $2 million to enter a redistricting lawsuit that they weren't even sued in, but to actually make sure that, you know, kids with disabilities have access. And I could go on and on. But there's a reason why Cobb County leads the state in students who take advantage of the special needs voucher. So the board says we oppose private school vouchers, but yet Cobb County families are fleeing the district for the special needs voucher and taking advantage of it because they aren't serving those kids. And so you see all these disconnects in what they're saying and what they're doing. And I think that there's just so much tremendous opportunity for us to continue advocating like Dr. Ford did, like Ms. Finn does, like all of us need to do is show up and demand change within the district. And I think the way we can also demonstrate that is exercising our right to vote. So.
We'll have one final question for our Q&A session.
Sorry, my last question is, what's the current status of the case?
Oh.
This one's fine. The case is no longer going on. It has been dismissed as moot, in part because, you know, we started this litigation to get rid of the old map. The old map we alleged, and as Chris said, we showed was a racial gerrymandering, and as a result of our litigation, there's a new map now. So as a result of that, the case is no longer going on. But, you know, again, to go back, the case was started to get rid of that old map, and that's what happened.
Thank you so much to our panelists, Seth, Akiva, Stephen, and Ms. Finn. That concludes the Q&A panel discussion. And I'm just going to go ahead and do some closing remarks. Panelists, you can go ahead and have your seats. And what I want to say is thank you, everyone, for being here on this evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Marietta-Cobb County, I want to extend my sincere appreciation to everyone who made this happen tonight possible, to our valued partners, the Southern Poverty Law Center, especially my left hand right here, Nadav, my right hand pointing to the fabulous panelists, to the family of Jillian Ford, as well to all of our guests that came out and ventured over here to the new area where we have our brewery right here and no voting that can be done here now. I want to thank also the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, ACLU of Georgia. Thank you for your collaboration, your expertise, and your continued commitment to protecting voting rights and strengthening our democracy. To our outstanding panelists, you are deeply grateful for your time, your insight, your clarity. Thank you for going through the Atlanta airport. We're glad that you got here tonight. Your perspectives have helped us illuminate the complexity of the Finn versus Cobb County Board of Elections, and it's a real impact on our community in the 2026 elections. I also want to thank our members. Thank you, Peyton, thank you so much for all the behind the scenes. Though all the marketing looks great, the IT team in the back, AV team in the back. For those who made everything possible for our guests, first in person as well as virtually, and for your engagement and thoughtful participation. Your presence represents the very spirit of civic involvement that the League stands for. And as we close, I encourage each of you to stay informed, stay engaged, and most important, make your voice heard in the upcoming elections. Local elections, especially school board elections, have a profound impact on our communities as well as our children, especially, and your vote truly matters. Thank you again for being part of this important discussion and conversation and your commitment to strong, informed democracy. Have a safe and wonderful evening. Our panelists and guests will be around if you'd like to come talk with them individually, but we do ask them to also stay to have some pictures.